Okay, so you just got a brand new bike and you want to go out there and ride it right away because maybe it's ready to race or something like that. Or is it ready to ride? That's usually the question that I'm asking. And to be completely honest with you, no, they're pretty much not ready to ride when you first get a dirt bike. I've had a lot of them over the years. And yeah, you could go out into a parking lot or something and ride the bike, but you're gonna be much better off if you spend a little bit of time setting the thing up. And so I have kind of a checklist that I go through, and I want to just talk about this with you right now. I can send you this checklist over kind of email or something, or you can just kind of copy and take some of these notes down. Now, I'm going to talk about over 60 things right here, and I've done these videos in the past, but it's been a long time since I've done a setup video. And I'm going to just kind of go through some of these things and help you guys to start thinking about some of the things you might want to do before you start riding your bike, okay? So I'm breaking this down into setup items and then protection items. And honestly, you don't have to do all these things. I don't do every single one of these things every time I get a bike, but it is something that I think about, and this is just to get your juices flowing. Hey, before I get too deep into this video, I just want to say, if you want to support what we're doing here, the best way to do it is to use my links to Rocky Mountain ATV. It's down in the video description, and it's over on my website at dirtbikechannel.com. There's a link up there that says Shop Rocky Mountain ATV. When you're on my website, if you click on that link, then you can buy anything they sell at Rocky Mountain ATV, and it helps support what we are doing here, helps to support these videos, and even give these bikes away to you. So please use those links to support the project here. Let's get back to the video. The first thing I want to do is I want to go through and check all my clickers on my suspension and set them all to standard. Typically, you're going to have some sort of a baseline in the manual or on a user guide, which it might be a PDF that you download with the bike or whatever. They usually don't even give these manuals out anymore, depending on the manufacturer. Like this bike did not come with a manual. The KTM over there did not come with a manual, but you can look on their website, get some sort of a service manual, go through, check the clickers, make sure that they're in the standard configuration, just as a baseline to start, because sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Then I'll go around the entire bike and I'll check for loose bolts. So I'll get a T-handle, I'll go through and I'll just check everything on the bike. Just make sure I put a wrench on everything on the bike. I'm looking for leaks in gaskets, I'm looking for leaks on the motor. I go under, pull off the skid plate if it has it, look for a leak there. I'm going to, sometimes on like an air fork, if I've got an air fork, sometimes I might rotate that air fork around so that I can get better access to the air chuck at the top. What else we have here? Oh, I'm gonna actually torque my triple clamps. And in doing so, I'm also going to pull the front wheel off and make sure that my forks are not on a bind. I take the wheel off and then I want to like put my axle back in and just see if the axle can spin freely. So I want to check all that, and then I will torque these bolts up here on the triple clamps. On this Beta, it's 17 Newton meters on the top and then 12 Newton meters on the bottom triple clamp. They've got it printed right on there, so that's super easy. I've got a torque wrench, I will do that. Also, I'm gonna set riding sag. Riding sag is probably one of the last things I do because I'll do some other things, but I got videos on how to do basically all this stuff. I'll set the bike so it has the correct amount of rider sag when I'm on it with all my gear on and full of fuel. For me, I like to run tubeless, and so you'll notice this bike, it hasn't even been ridden, but it's got tires on it that are not the stock tires. And then I like tubeless, I love tubeless, and so I'll put tubeless on, and then a lot of times I'll change the tires out because I didn't love the tires that came on this bike. They're not my favorite at all, so I switched to some tires that I do really love. I'm also going to be checking my chain tension. I had to do that on this bike. The chain tension was really, really loose on this when I first got it, so I tightened that up. Sometimes the head bearing tension. So this bike actually was really good. It's a little tight, but I mean, I think it'll break in. But sometimes sometimes your head bearing tension, that's this tension right here, sometimes the handlebars are super floppy, and that can make it kind of feel unstable. So I just want to make sure that I've got, this is a little tight, but I think it's going to be okay once I start riding it. But I'll check the head bearing tension. I'm also going to go around and check for loose spokes. I can just really just kind of go through and clip a wrench on this stuff. You can use a spoke torque wrench, but I just make sure I don't have a loose spoke because sometimes you have them. You might want to install handguards. This bike doesn't have handguards, and I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with that, but handguards are a good idea if you're going to be riding off-road. I also move my levers inward, meaning I move them closer to the center, all right? And the reason why I do that is so I don't break off my levers as soon as I go down. I'm also gonna put Teflon tape under my levers here. So I'll probably roll in some shots of this, but I took the clutch perch off and the brake perch off and wrapped a couple rounds of Teflon tape and then put it back on. And that means that these things can move up and down. They won't, the Teflon tape makes it so that you can get it tight enough that it won't just flop down, but it's still loose enough that it can move around, and that will help you to not break levers. So I'm doing that. Let's see what else we have here. Oh yeah. Rejet the carburetor. So on this, I have to tune carburetors here because I'm riding at higher elevation. This bike, I actually have a SC2, a smart carb coming, which I'll have to tune anyway. But I'm going to put a smart carb on this bike because I want it to run at any altitude, and it's a giveaway bike, and I want the owner who gets it to be able to run it at any altitude right when they get it. So I'm going to the carburetor. If it was a KTM TPI bike, I will just go ahead and put the air screw mod in the thing just to get it great off the gate. I'm also going to check my throttle. Oh, this one's a little tight. The throttle fleep, there's not much free. Oh, let's see. Yeah, there's not a lot of free play on this. Sorry, the heat came on in my shop and I had to go check it. Throttle free play. This one actually, this is something I've overlooked. This one does not have enough throttle free play right now. I'm gonna need to look at that because there's basically no free play in this sucker. But I'm gonna be installing a different carburetor on this in just a second. And so yeah, there's not enough free play on this. There's no free play. So that's something that will have to be checked. I have to work on that. Another thing, and I'm just looking at this list on my phone. I'm gonna check the brake free play down here on the rear brake. Now this, I should have about 3 to 5 millimeters. This one does have some free play. The reason why you want free play is so that you're not actually just riding the brake. You'll boil your brake fluid if you don't have any free play on this. And it looks like there is plenty on that. I also want to run my brakes in. So basically there's usually like a little bit of a film on the brake pads or the brake rotor themselves, and the brakes don't work that well until I've gone around the block and kind of drug the brakes for like a little while, and you just got to, I call it running them in or burning them in, because the front brake and the rear brake usually don't work very well on a brand new bike until you get some of those like residues off there. And I do that by just dragging the brake up and down my road for a few minutes until the brakes become more responsive and they actually work. Handlebar mounts, sometimes you can get different things. I'm going to, in this case, I want my handlebars to be basically directly over centered over my forks. And so this one has like maybe 12 different positions that you can do on this particular Beta because there's 3 holes. So I'm gonna, and then probably the mounts are offset. So I'll probably just flip the mounts around and get this actually centered so my handlebars are directly over the middle of my forks. So I'm gonna look at that. Let's see here. Oh, check wheel bearings and things like that for grease. So you can do that. A lot of these bikes are pretty good with that, but sometimes they come very low on grease. On this bike, I'm going to take these steering stops out, or at least adjust them so the bike can turn a little bit tighter. Because the way it's set up right now, there are some steering stops that make it so this bike, there's a way more turning radius that I can get out of this. So I'm gonna be taking those out really soon and adjusting that. If you have ability to get a spark arrestor, that's probably a good time to put it on if you're gonna be riding off-road out in public land. I still need to work on that with this bike. Also wanna check all my oil levels and check my coolant level, make sure there's enough coolant in here. Sometimes I'll switch to a different type of coolant, but I don't always switch, but I just want to make sure that I'm all the way up on that. Sometimes I'll take off this tail light assembly piece over here. See, this is where this is, and KTM does this sometimes, Beta does this sometimes, Sherco has it. You can pull this tail light assembly, and this is where you could also put a license plate right here on this thing, but this is where the tail light is. The reason why I take that off is this stuff breaks really easily when you loop the bike over or you wheelie over or whatever, and this stuff all will just go shattering. And not only will you break this tail light piece, it will also break your rear fender because it just makes everything more rigid. So a lot of times I'll take this part off and then just run the rear fender. Sometimes I'll change out throttle cams. Some of the bikes come with different throttle cams to make it aggressive or less aggressive or whatever. I don't think this bike came with anything like that, so I'm just gonna run the stock cam on it. But if you were gonna do like a throttle cam or something like that, a different throttle cam, this is a good time to do it. Sometimes this is a good time to check the battery and the battery connections. Sometimes you might want to put like a little dielectric grease on these connections to make sure that they're not corroding. And sometimes I'll even install a different battery, like maybe like an anti-gravity battery or something, like a high output battery in here on this bike. I don't know that I'll do it on this one. Another thing, I'm checking air filters. Like I'll check my air filter to make sure that there's enough oil on that. Sometimes I felt like there's basically no oil on the air filter, and so I'll check that to make sure it's good to go. Other things I might do, I might install like a grab strap for the bike. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, but you can get a grab strap and put it over here on the fender to like lift it back up out of holes, things like that. Sometimes I'll install like an inline fuel filter on the bike just to catch any of those contaminants and things like that. That would go in between my fuel tank and the carburetor or the fuel injection system. A lot of those do have fuel filters already, but sometimes you could add like another one. It's just something to think about. And then if it's some of the KTMs that don't have like a capacitor on it, so it can't really bump start if the battery gets dead, I'll think about putting one of those on there. Okay, so now let's talk about protection. I want to have a skid plate on the bike. I'm going to need to probably get a different skid plate for this bike because this skid plate, the stock skid plate, does not cover the linkage. So if I'm going to have the bike in any sort of enduro situation, I'm going to want to install a skid plate on there. A rear disc guard. A rear disc guard is a great thing to have here so that you're not bending the rear disc if you're riding in a lot of rocky terrain with some bigger drops and things like that. Some of the bikes I'll put like a swing arm guard thing over here. Some of the KTMs I've done it on in the past. So there's just some protective pieces that you can put on there to keep it from knocking off your chain guide over there. I usually don't change the chain guides unless I completely destroy it. It's not something I'll swap. I do like to install either bar ends on my bike or something like that. So you'll notice this bike does have bar ends on it. That way when I tip the bike over, it doesn't immediately just smash my grips. It just allows the grips to last a little bit longer. So I'll install bar ends on a lot of bikes. Fork covers like these. So a lot of times I'll put on some fork covers. Like I'll have to roll on a shot of this, but you can see these will just snap on the forks. I'll put those on there. Sometimes I'll put a swing arm cover on the bikes. You can get several different types of these things. It's just this plastic piece that comes over this and protects the swing arm from a bunch of scratches and things like that. A lot of times I'll do a radiator fan, okay? So on the fuel injected 2-strokes, it's almost kind of mandatory now, but you'll get a fan. Trail Tech makes a really good fan that bolts onto the radiator right here. And then you run a power wire to your battery, and then you can set the exact temperature that you want the fan to come on and off with, and that'll keep the bike from overheating. So I put that in protection because I think it is protection. Sometimes I'll put fork shoes. Do I have a set of fork shoes to show you? So these are fork shoes right here. These are made by Cherby's, and essentially they just go on the bottom of the forks right down here. And that way, if you do smash into anything, you're hitting this plastic protective piece. Another thing I'll do on a lot of the bikes is put on some radiator braces or radiator guards so that when you tip the bike over, you don't bend the radiator, or you have a crash or something, you don't absolutely destroy the radiators. That's a good thing to do. Some of the bikes require that, where it's like they're really susceptible to being bent. And other bikes don't. Like some of the newer KTMs, I don't put the radiator braces and guards on there because they're pretty good. But I think on this one, I think I would definitely on the Beta put those radiator braces or guards. You can get them from Flow Motorsports or Bulletproof Designs. There's a bunch of them out there, Enduro Engineering, and they all make a pretty good thing. So that's something to think about as well. In the past, sometimes I've put on a different clutch cover. I have gotten away from this. I haven't needed them as much, but I mean, if you're gonna go in super hard enduro stuff, what'll happen is you'll get a rock that'll come up here and smash the bottom of this, or push your brake lever into this and put a hole in it. There are some clutch covers that are more durable than others, and so that's something that I sometimes think about. I don't often do that though. Another thing is putting a rotor guard, oh, there goes my seat. putting a fork. I got stuff going everywhere. Sometimes I'll think about putting a rotor guard on this front rotor, you know, to protect the brake from getting bent and dinged up like that, so you can do that. Pipe guard, I just spun the bike around. A lot of people do run pipe guards on these bikes. I usually don't, because I feel like if you have a pipe guard on there, a lot of times you're just putting the energy somewhere else. This is a really, really bad ding, and the reason why I bring this up, this is the worst one I've had. It's hard for you to see, but it basically, it pretty much shut this bike off to about, I don't know, 70, it only had about 30% of the flow, it looks like to me. But the bike still ran really great on the way back to the truck. And it was unbelievable. I'm like, that was the worst pipe bend I'd ever seen. It was so bent, it didn't really want to come off the bike, but the bike actually still ran really, really good. It was on one of the KTMs over here. So I don't worry about the pipe guards because I think they just make the bikes, they can rattle and whatever, and they're expensive. A lot of times the pipe guards are as much as a pipe, at least the aftermarket pipes. So I'll just ding the pipe up a little bit until it starts to rattle. Some people will put the cylinder head savers on here. I've never broken the cylinder, like the exhaust that goes over the exhaust flange. I think it's called like exhaust saver or something like that. I don't put those on, but some people do. Yeah, there's just a few things. Like there was some stuff that I used to do on the KTMs, like I would put some protectors down here on some of my radiator hoses to keep them from getting pinched, like a power valve puncture. But KTM's changed that over after like 2023 or so, and so it's not a big problem. And I don't think it's going to be a problem on this beta at all either. And then like, say if this was a KTM, I might want to change the throttle position cover to something that was more like an aluminum cover to make it a little bit harder. And sometimes like these fuel petcocks can be kind of a little bit of a danger zone on some of the bikes where you might go to like, I don't know, it's pretty hard to do it on a beta like this, but there's just some additional things that I would do on some of the KTM bikes as I learned over the years. But I mean, that's pretty much it. The main things are just get the bike set up for your weight, you know, for sag is what I was gonna say. We touched on that a little bit, and just going through and making sure everything is in order. You assume that the bike is good to go because it's a brand new bike, but I've just learned time and time again that you'll find little weird things, like it might be a loose spoke, it might be a loose bolt, you know, something that is just not quite right, or there's a leak in something. And while the bike is new and everything is uber clean, that's just a really good time to go around and check some of this stuff and get things set up. And I think you'll set yourself up for success that way. And then like so much of this is maintenance. Like after you go out and ride, I try to wash the entire bike, get it all clean, and then just kind of look things over. And you can save yourself a lot of trouble that way. So anyway, that's what I've got for you guys today. And if you want to support what I'm doing here, use the links down in the video description to buy stuff from Rocky Mountain ATV. You click on that link and then you can purchase anything that they sell, and it helps to support me. This will be a giveaway bike in the month of March. So I'll be giving this bike away as well as a KTM 250XC. So stay tuned for all that stuff. And until next time, leave a single track. Thanks.